Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Living Divinely podcast, the podcast that is dedicated to helping you rediscover your true self through refined and intentional living. I'm your host, Amber Janae, and you know it, as always, I'm so excited to have you all along with me on this journey. So let's talk about it. Fall is here, and I am very, very excited about the fall season. It is absolutely one of my favorite seasons. We are inching closer and closer to the holidays, and this is my favorite time of the year. I've already started updating the house and getting some things together. This is just my absolute favorite time of the year. I cannot complain. And while this is my favorite time of the year, like I know that the fall and winter seasons are seasons that a lot of people dread. So today's episode will shed light on a very important, yet I guess it's a topic that we can classify as sensitive, but it's also a topic that I feel so many of us have struggled with, or at least know someone who has. So today we're going to talk about seasonal depression, also known as seasonal affective disorder or SAD, and how choosing to live intentionally can help ease the emotional heaviness that we sometimes feel when the winter months roll around, or really any period where your energy feels low, you're not feeling quite like yourself. And if you've ever felt like you've experienced darker days, darker moments, um, and within those periods, like even the simplest things, the simplest task feel like, I don't know, climbing Mount Everest. If this has ever been you, like you were not alone. I have personally been there too. Especially during pregnancy and postpartum. I talked about this a lot on the previous episode of the podcast. And I really was very transparent about how my mental health took a significant hit while pregnant and all of the contributing factors, and adding in the additional layer of seasonal depression on top of everything that I was already going through and experiencing was incredibly overwhelming for my mind, my body, and my spirit. But I have found ways to navigate through those times, and I want to share them with you today. So hopefully by the end of this episode, we'll have explored different practices to support your emotional well-being. And I also want to explore how small intentional actions can help you find light, even when you feel like every single day is dark and weighing on you. So let's start with recognizing seasonal depression and its effects. For me, seasonal depression has always felt like an additional layer of weight on my back, on my shoulders. Like life just feels so heavy in those moments. And I will not say that it's something that I've completely overcome, because that would be an absolute lie. What I will say is a lot of what I will be sharing today in pre-planning and preparing ahead of the season and ahead of time really helps make seasonal depression for me less heavy during this time of the year. Like I mentioned earlier in the episode, I had my son in October, so I had already planned prior to him being born to have my therapist on speed dial. Like during my pregnancy, I was already struggling with just unusual anxieties, all the things that come with pregnancy. And then eventually, your body is hit with the drastic changes of, everything that postpartum brings. And it was difficult to find motivation. Absolutely everything in my life felt gray. If you've ever been through pregnancy or experienced postpartum depression, you know that it comes with its own emotional roller coaster. So imagine going through all of these emotions, being someone who struggles with seasonal depression, and then having that added layer of emotional just discomfort, um, and feeling like you're out of control when you're dealing with, or you're not in control of your mind and your body, and your emotions when you're experiencing postpartum depression. It was like whatever emotional weight that I felt and was used to feeling from seasonal depression, it multiplied during those times because I was experiencing just that heavy weight, from postpartum depression. I also want to be clear, like seasonal depression, like it isn't just about feeling sad. I think a lot of people like, oh, this person is sad and they'll get over it, but it's absolutely not that easy. Like going through periods of depression can make everyday activities, you know, simple things, getting out of bed, going to work, or even finding joy in the things that you love the most. It makes all of that feel impossible. I remember those mornings when the alarm would go off and all I could do was lie there and hoping that if I ever found the strength to get up, that the day would pass as quickly as it had come. But here's the thing about that, like acknowledging those feelings. Like I was able to, and I still am able to clearly articulate and explain what I was feeling in those moments. So being able to acknowledge those feelings and recognizing the patterns, like that was the first step for me finding relief. You cannot fight what you don't recognize or what you choose not to accept and embrace when it comes to what you're feeling emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And if this is something that resonates with you, I want to say, I want you to give yourself permission to acknowledge how you feel. Like there is no shame in what you're healing or what you're feeling. And it's important to acknowledge those feelings so that you can start on the path to healing. Now that we've acknowledged the struggle, and the things that you struggle with, let's talk about how we can use intentional living practices to create some light during these days. Like I said, these are things that I have practiced religiously over the last several years, and they have done wonders for me. Starting with setting emotional and physical boundaries. Like one of the most important things that I had to learn throughout my mental health journey, especially during pregnancy and later as a new mom, was how to set boundaries with myself and others. Boundaries became very critical during those times when I felt like I was drained of energy, but still felt very much obligated to show up for everyone else. During my periods of, navigating depression, these boundaries were even more important than they had ever been before. And sometimes setting boundaries means, saying no to social events, taking time off of work to prioritize your mental health. One of the biggest things that I've noticed in friends, my clients, and even family, and even myself in the past is feeling obligated to go to work and add the stresses of work on top of already experiencing deep states of depression. It is okay to protect your mental space and physical energy when you're feeling low. In fact, this is one of the most necessary aspects of setting emotional and physical boundaries. We often think that because we physically have the ability to do something that we absolutely should, and that is wrong. Just because you can do something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should be doing it. It's important that throughout your journey and throughout navigating and figuring out ways to find balance during these periods, that you're prioritizing your mental health. And that starts with conserving your energy for the things that matter the most. And what matters the most is you prioritizing you getting better in those moments. And speaking of prioritization, let's talk about rest and recovery. This particular, I guess I would say, task was very tough for me as someone who's always been very independent and driven. It was hard for me to accept that sometimes, shoot, the most productive thing I could do was rest, you know? I actually was just telling a client the other day that when it comes to self investment, it isn't always about a financial investment. It isn't all about the money piece. Sometimes the investment is just giving yourself permission to do nothing. During pregnancy, I pushed myself too hard, so hard at times because, I was just in this space, like thinking that resting was somehow me failing as a mother. Also, being afraid to just vocalize that I need to rest. After my son was born, I was still in that mental space and physical space of trying to do it all. I wanted to be the perfect mom, wanted to be the perfect wife, the perfect employee, and entrepreneur. Like there were so many things happening, but I had to accept that it was exhausting. I was exhausting myself. Um, I wasn't showing up 100% for my family. And when I experienced periods of depression, like that's when it started to become really, really clear that, girl, you are not just tired, you are burnt out. And being intentional about rest in those moments, it's about more than just, oh, I'm going to take a nap. Oh, I'm going to get some sleep. It's about giving yourself space to recover emotionally, mentally, and physically. Living intentionally means honoring your body's signals and doing so before your body forces that on you. If you're feeling, a period of low energy, just not being yourself, it is okay to take a step back, slow down, and really realign and refocus with yourself. This is something that I had to do constantly. And it's something that I also constantly had to remind myself to do. Rest for us it's not a reward. It's our birthright. Something else that I was also very intentional about focusing on is just self-compassion. Self-compassion really, man, it played such a huge role in my healing journey during postpartum. And especially even before having a child, during my periods of dealing with seasonal depression over the years, we tend to be our own harshest critics, especially when we're already feeling low. And I think during those times, it was very difficult for me to be honest with who I was in that moment or in those moments and what I was feeling. And I think it just it made me feel low. It made me feel, self-conscious. I didn't have a lot of confidence in those moments. I felt like I was doing something wrong. I felt like, why me? Um, why would I be having these feelings? Why would I, have to experience being depressed? And when I couldn't keep up with everyday things, especially when I was still in school or when I started my first big girl job, when I couldn't keep up with work or the times that I couldn't keep up with parenting, I would often feel like I was doing something wrong, like I was failing, not just failing at the things that I should have been doing, but failing at life. And the truth is, like, we're all human. We deserve to have those moments where we're not on our A game. We can't operate at 100% all of the time. Self compassion is about giving yourself grace, especially on those days when you feel like you're not necessarily doing enough. During the winter months, or, those days when everything feels a little bit shorter, time is moving a little bit more faster, it's so important for you to be gentle with yourself and allow yourself to feel your emotions without judgment. Like the biggest thing, I feel like a lot of people who go through depression or they're masking that side of themselves because they're over judgmental. And we put ourselves in that space where we attack ourselves and we say the worst things about ourselves when we're experiencing deep levels of depression because we think if the world knew what we were going through and experiencing, this is how the world would see us. And that is not always the case. Living intentionally when you feel depressed you feel sad, you don't feel like yourself, means not only allowing yourself to create and set boundaries, but and not just resting and recovering, but also being kind to yourself. Kindness is what creates space for you to heal. Another essential part of having or navigating depression, especially seasonal depression, is just building a strong support system. A lot of the times, it is definitely hard when you're dealing with seasonal depression because so many people are busy, so many people are on the go, they're traveling to go see their own families, and you're feeling like there's no one there and no one to be present. But I will be the first person to tell you, if you just have one person who you can talk to, one person who understands your journey and what you're navigating through, that is really truly all that you need. We feel like when we're at our lowest, we have to bear the brunt of these experiences on our own. But navigating them on your own or trying to get through them on your own is what makes the process even more difficult to navigate through. There have been plenty of moments throughout my mental health journey when I felt like no one understood what I was feeling or even attempted to understand, especially when I was younger. It often felt like, I had to shoulder everything on my own. But eventually I learned that I did not have to. There was an experience that I went through in high school, and I had been desperately trying to explain to my family like what I was experiencing, what I was navigating through. And it felt like, in those moments, you just feel like you don't have control over yourself. You don't have control over your mind, your body, and your spirit. And I remember showing up at school and a friend looking at me like, something's not right. You're not okay. And taking me to the administrative office, and they were taking their time because it was like first thing in the morning and that friend had a car, and every single one of my friends like put me in the car, picked me up, and like they drove me to the hospital. And I really didn't have to say what I was experiencing, what was happening, and what was going on, but they were there for me. They understood. And when I was finally able to talk about it, like it became this big support system because apparently we were all having the same thoughts and feelings and all going through the same situation. And learning that you don't have to do it alone really helps, and having a reliable support system really made all of the difference for me. Building a support system might look like and might mean that you have to toughen up, put your big girl pants or your big boy pants on, and confide in a partner, confide in a friend, a therapist, or even an online community. I think one of the biggest fears when you finally get in a relationship and you feel like I really like this person, one of the biggest fears for people who live with depression is having to be honest about this. Like, this is the person that is closest to me, and they may at some point experience me in my lowest. And I have to prepare them for that. And I think that is a really big fear for a lot of people, having to confide in a partner, um, or a friend who doesn't know that you deal with these things, and just be openly transparent about it. This also means like not being afraid to ask for help when you need it. For a very long time, I was afraid to be honest about what I was experiencing because I thought that my mental health was not only something that I should be ashamed of, but I was afraid of the response that I would get. I was afraid of the rejection on the other side or the lack of understanding. I had been trying to explain to family for so many years that I didn't feel normal. I didn't feel like myself in these periods or these moments. And after a while of, the misunderstanding, the lack of empathy, the lack of communication and support, recommendations for, help, after experiencing that for so long, you develop a fear of, confiding in others because that fear is essentially rooted in, not getting the response that you need or feeling rejected when you do share these things. So, yes, sometimes just having someone to listen can be enough to lift some of the emotional weight off of you. This was very critical for me during, my postpartum in the early months of adjusting to motherhood. Again, I talked about this on a previous episode, just finding community in the right spaces. Sometimes who and what we think community is absolutely differs, especially when we're going through our lowest points. I've always been taught when you're at your lowest, you find out who is really for you and who is meant for you. Um, that has rang very true for me during postpartum, during pregnancy, the early stages of motherhood, and especially prior to all that, navigating and learning to live with my mental health issues. And if you don't have a solid support system, I'm the first one to tell you also that you can create one. Living intentionally means actively seeking out the people and resources that can help you maintain your mental and emotional balance. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned from my journey with seasonal depression is the importance of finding joy in the small moments. Like, this is something that I never, ever practiced before. But when the world feels heavy, those tiny moments of happiness can, at a lot of times, be your lifeline. Like, what does it feel like to find moments that remind you that I'm okay, you know, even if it's for 15 minutes, even if it's for an hour, moments that remind you that it's worth being present. It's worth finding those little pockets of joy. I love the creator Novella who always speaks about creating pockets of peace. You absolutely have to learn to do this if you want to thrive and create happiness in those darker moments. For me, it has always been sunset drives with the sunroof open, listening to some of my favorite music and just appreciating the scenery, appreciating nature. It's always been the first cup of coffee in the morning. Or I'm a big fan now of an afternoon latte, walk outside with my son, or watching him play outside and drive his little Power Wheel cars, letting him make a meal for me in his play kitchen, indulging in a hobby, baking, writing, sketching, or even just, 10 minutes of sitting quietly. It's easy to overlook the small things when we're focused on just getting through the day, just getting it all over with. But those small moments can really provide us with the most peace. In the darker moments, finding joy may look different for everybody. It might mean also for a lot of people finding comfort in your living environment, making sure you have candles on deck that feel good and inspire you, listening to music that uplifts your spirits. These moments won't necessarily erase the sadness, but they will remind you that there is still beauty, even in the quiet, even in the most mundane things. Your living space plays such a huge role in this. Listen, when I started being really intentional about my personal space and how my personal spaces felt, it was absolutely a game changer for me. And granted, some of you may be living in at home and feel like, you don't have the authority or ability to change how your room feels because you live in an environment that is not solely yours. Some of you may also live in an environment where the people you live with contribute to your depression or your stress. And I want to personally encourage you and remind you that that is a very limited way of thinking. When I lived at home, I curated my room to my liking. I started buying things that made me feel at peace. My room always felt and smelled different from the rest of the house. I remember my aunt coming over one weekend and she was doing my hair, and she walked into my room and was visiting for like the very first time because it was like a new home that we had just moved into. And I remember her complimenting me on how my room had such a more calming vibe than the rest of the house. And doing this, creating this vibe, creating this environment really has carried on with me and carried with me as I moved into my own space. And it is still something that I live by and I practice in these moments. And investing in your environment is a very essential part of living and doing so intentionally, because it is our surroundings that are an extension of us. When you curate a space that feels like a safe haven, it becomes a place where you can retreat, a place where you can find solace, even on those difficult and rough days. When I was intentional about how my space looked and felt, my depression became a lot less heavier. And especially when I was living alone in those colder months, the winter where it got darker earlier, it was a lot colder. I was living alone. So, you don't have any real distractions. You're just in silence. Like, it was something that I stopped really dreading during those times, because I had created a space where I felt comfort, I felt warm, I felt peace, and it helped me navigate through those difficult moments a lot easier. Even now, rearranging my home office, investing in new elements depending on the season that make my home feel a little bit more new and alive, creating comfort with the best linens and the best throw blankets, investing in quality baking supplies, my fancy coffee machine, candles, calming colors, like all of these things. They sound so superficial, of course, and sound so simple, but they are such a powerful act of self care. It is a reminder every day when I walk around my home, when I sit down at my home, at my desk in my home office, or walk into the kitchen. Every day, every single thing is a reminder that I deserve comfort and peace. I was literally just saying on Twitter the other day how much I love being home and how this wasn't always the case for me. I learned how to be present in my environment later in life, and I learned the importance of being intentional about curating my environment to feel warm and feel like a place that I wanted to spend my time. I have curated so much love and warmth and joy between the walls that me and my family live in. And I am so forever grateful for that. This is not just something I benefit from, but my little family does as well. And it's really important to me, that we all feel that sense of comfort and peace. Like, even when it's dark, like, wow, I feel calm, I feel at peace. Our living environments can either support us or they can drain us, especially when you're at your lowest. By being mindful of how we arrange and care for our spaces, we create environments that nourish us emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So think about it, whether it's, adding additional cozy elements to your living room, setting up a corner in one of your rooms to meditate, or just surrounding yourself with things that bring you peace, plants, little trinkets and decor. Your home is a reflection of your internal world. When life feels overwhelming, having a supportive and calming space really makes all the difference. It's like having a soft place to land when everything else around you feels out of control. So, as part of living intentionally, don't be afraid to invest time and energy into creating an environment at home that brings you comfort. Investing in yourself is absolutely a priority. Your space should not just be a place to live, a place to go to sleep at night, but it should be a place that you have the ability to heal and recharge. This intentional approach to your environment can help you find the comfort that you need in those lower moments. At your lowest, it should be the place where you feel free. You feel like I can get through this. I will make it through this. Your environment should be that one thing that is a constant reminder that while the outside world may be chaotic and your internal world may feel chaotic, you have created a space where you can feel and find peace. So, as we close, I just want to take the time to remind all of you that depression is very real, and it is a very real and difficult challenge for a lot of people in this world. A lot of people that you surround yourself every day and may not even know because they put on their brave face, they put on a big smile, and you would never even know what they're dealing with. So, if you're not someone who struggles with depression, but you're listening in, I encourage you to be mindful of the people you surround yourself with. Check in with your people. For those of you who struggle with depression, although depression is rough, it is a challenge, just know that you don't have to go through this journey alone. You don't have to fight these battles alone. Living intentionally, though it doesn't mean, you'll never have difficult days, you'll never have rough moments. Even me, like I consider myself to be the most intentional person that I know. Like I've literally built and curated a life that is rooted in intentionality, but I still have my rough days, those difficult moments, those times where I have to reset, recharge, and realign. And even though, you're being intentional, doesn't mean that it won't be hard. What it does mean is that you're actively choosing to take small and mindful steps to care for yourself during the days and the times that it does get rough. If you're currently struggling with depression or you're just dreading the upcoming colder months because you know that seasonal depression will hit, I see you. I hear you. I have been there. I know what it feels like, but I do want to encourage you that with more compassion for yourself, creating space to set boundaries, and finding the time to rest and recharge, there will be light at the end of that tunnel. Even in the most darkest moments, there is light. I hope that this conversation encourages you to take care of yourself, especially as we start moving into the colder months and the holiday season is approaching. For those of you who are not subscribed, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, leave a comment, especially if this episode resonated with you. If you know someone who could utilize the tools and resources in this episode, please do share it with them. And as always, I am here to support you on this journey of living more intentionally. You are not alone. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And don't forget to join me on the next episode where we will continue exploring ways to live more divinely.